I want to talk about in this clip is the agrarian cycle. Now, that might sound like a big word, but what it really means is that the early church, in fact the church that the early church settled on, which was the Jewish connection, was an agricultural society. These were agricultural people. These were people who went out and they sowed seed, and the seed grew, and then they went and harvested the things that came from those plants. It was a cycle to that, and that cycle is the cycle of the seasons. And that's what we need to understand in the understanding of church year, is the seasonal structure. And so the seasonal structure works as a cycle. Starting, let's say we start at autumn, and from autumn we then go to winter, and from winter to spring, and from spring to summer. And of course then from summer back to autumn. And so what we see is this movement through the seasons that go on year after year after year after year. Of course, for us today, we talk less about seasons because for us, particularly for those of us who live within the cities, we really organize our environment to suit us. So when it's too hot, we cool it down. When it's too cold, we warm it up. And so what we try and do is to maintain as even a temperature as possible in terms of life. And so for us, that's more tricky to understand seasons. If you come from the Pacific, you also find it more difficult to understand about seasons because basically every season is very similar to the one that's past. But that's not the case in Europe. That's not the case in the Middle East. There's a very clear sense of the differences of each season. So in autumn is the season of harvesting. It's the plants have been growing through the summer, and now in autumn you're coming to harvest them, and you're bringing in all the fattened beef and the fattened lamb in order that you can kill them and keep the meat through the winter. Because when the winter arrives, there is nothing growing. The land is too hard, there's snow, there's ice, there's nothing that can grow. And so in the winter, you have to live off that which has come through autumn. Of course, then out of winter comes spring. The land begins to soften up again, and the opportunity to go out and plow, to go out and sow the seed, and to begin that cycle again. And so we've got from autumn harvesting, to winter being fallow, to spring in sowing the seed, and then moving into summer, when in fact we then go out and we allow those seeds to germinate and to grow, and we tend the plants that begin to grow up so that they can produce the fruit again, so that we can start the process of harvesting again. So we go from harvest to fallow, to sowing, to growing. And that cycle continues over and over again if you're a farmer. It's that farming cycle. It's that cycle of the seasons that in fact is the very thing that connects the church cycle. It's the events of our lives. It's the events of life in the same way that we start off as children and we become toddlers and we move into young children, and then from there we go into teenagehood, and from teenagehood into young adulthood, and then into adulthood, and then into senior. There's a sense of movement of life. There's a process of it. But even though we're going through those different stages, each stage is based in that same yearly cycle. And it's that yearly cycle that we're trying to bring out within the concept of the church year. And it's that cycle that in fact undergirds the way in which we understand the Bible. It also undergirds the way in which we've done worship over the last 2,000 years. And it's that cycle that we want to explore and to understand within this module.